Welcome back to another episode of Trust the Process. I am your host, Martin Bugaj, and in today's episode, I am joined by Coach Chris, one of the incredible coaches on my team, and together we are tackling something that trips up a lot of high performers on their transformation journey. It's not lack of knowledge, and it's not even lack of effort. It's the temptation to overcomplicate things, to change what's already working, to chase novelty, or to try and outwork inconsistency. We talked about why simplicity beats complexity, the cost of doing too much too soon, how to audit yourself honestly, and why the real progress comes from doubling down on the basics and not switching strategies every time you get bored. If you're the type of person who's always doing more, but still not where you want to be, this episode will hit hard. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of Trust the Process podcast with myself, Martin Bugaj, and one of our coaches, Chris Loughton. How are you, Chris?
Good, thanks.
Everything going well so far with things? Clients, training, all of that?
Yeah, I feel like the year's started pretty well. Obviously kind of head into the middle part and a bit challenging with vacations and nicer weather and stuff, but everybody's ticking along nicely.
Excellent. And big news for you as well, because you've recently had a little boy that welcomed to the world. So how is he doing?
Yeah, doing well. 6 weeks yesterday he was, so had his checkup and everything's moving in the right direction.
Nice. Good stuff. So we are essentially now, both of us are fathers. So we're adding extra experience. I mean, we're bringing extra value to this whole coaching process, because majority of our clients are parents as well, dads. So that's great. Awesome. Today's episode is essentially going to be about our clients' journeys and the main sort of takeaways from those journeys. We are going to focus and talk about what to do and what not to do when you are fully immersed in the coaching process in our program. So I suppose we'll kick it off almost straight away with a couple of things. So the very first thing that I wanted to address is how to make more progress with things when things are going well. So, we are talking about, and we've got some notes here. We're talking about consistency, patience, changes, etc. One of the most common things that a lot of our clients bring up during the coaching process is when they're making progress, they get very motivated, they get hyped up, and they want to get to the end goal or to the destination a lot quicker. So they want to speed things up. Would you agree with that statement, first of all?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common situation, to be fair.
So things are going well, and people, like I said, get really hyped up, they get motivated, and they think, oh, how can I outsmart the process? How can I get to my end goal quicker? What more can I do in order to speed things up? And what we always say is trust the process and just stick to what's kind of expected of you during this whole coaching process, and just nail the basics on daily basis. What would you say are the most common, from your experience, things that pop up from our clients?
It's often that question of, how can I get more out of the process? Things are going well, progress is ticking along nicely. Everything that is kind of currently in there from an objective standpoint, is being nailed regularly. And then there's that desire for, what can I add into the mix now? What's that extra thing I can do that's going to help me push on a little bit quicker? And it makes sense, and you'd understand why people would want to go there. But often the biggest issue is, when things are going so well, you've pretty much found that kind of sweet spot and balance within life that that's what works. And, throwing other things into the mix can often be a little bit problematic. So, people want to think about, maybe a bigger deficit, more training sessions, more steps. And, those are the kind of things that can yield more progress. But there's only so much you can do and move forward with. Just because you're doing more work doesn't mean you're going to get more progress. And I think often with, especially a lot of the guys we work with, right, busy lifestyles, work, family, they're already kind of pushing the limits with sort of everything they've got that ability to do at one time. So then chucking in a load of extra stuff can often be more disruptive than it can be productive. And it's, I think, trying to manage some of those expectations and understanding that, it is just consistency and patience, like you said, right? Those are the two things that if you could have anything else extra added in, it'd be those. Keep doing more of what you're doing, keep doing it for longer. And that's kind of the secret recipe to more success, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's interesting, isn't it? Because most of our clients, before joining the program, they are already doing a lot. And not just, in their professional life, family life, but also in a lot of cases, fitness-wise. They'll go to the gym. The one of the most common things that pop up always on my strategy calls is, what's the issue? What's the obstacle? Well, I don't have time. Well, time and motivation. And I always say time, in most cases, is not necessarily an issue. And motivation hardly ever is an issue, because if you're on a call, you're motivated to achieve something. Lack of time, in most cases, actually isn't an issue either, because a lot of these guys are already doing a lot. The biggest problem is it's inefficiency. They are doing the things that they either shouldn't be doing, or they're doing the wrong things, or too much of the things that are not really getting them any return on their time investment. So when they join the program, they almost by default expect to be doing a lot more that they've been doing prior to joining us. And in most of these cases, our job is to manage these people and say, okay, what's actually feasible from a time perspective? Let's just overlook at where you are, what you're doing right now, what's working, what's not working, remove the unnecessary stress. Here is the plan, here is the roadmap, here is the strategy. Just do these basics. And in most cases, if not all cases, if they stick to everything, they just get great results almost immediately. Stress goes down, they get more time, they are more efficient, they have more clarity on what they should be doing, they have good strategy. All they need to do is adhere and execute. And like I said, almost immediately they start seeing results. Blood pressure, sleep, stress, all of those things start to improve. Weight is starting to drop. They have more energy. They're more present with their families, whatever it may be. And then it gets to a point where, like I said earlier, they're getting a little bit hyped up. They're getting very happy that the progress is showing. So they want to start doing more and more. And I suppose what I wanted to talk about with you is why more is not better, because that is ultimately the number one mistake that most men do. They think that more means better. And arguably, in most of those cases, more is never better. Would you agree with that statement? And if so, why would you say more is never better?
Yeah, I think from a training perspective, it's often a common situation. People want to do more work, more within the session, more across the week. And when we think about things like volume and intensity are always going to be inversely proportional. So yes, if we drive up training volume, we're going to drive down overall training intensity. It might feel like you're working harder, but you simply cannot work harder across more sets, a higher volume of training. So if we chuck in a load more straight away, the quality is likely going to decrease. Your ability to recover is probably going to decrease. The other thing to always bear in mind as well is, especially early on in the journey, most guys who start with us are going to be in a deficit. because they've got, excess fat we've got to pull off. So you're going to have, less recovery anyway because of that. So we need to be mindful of not just running people into the ground. And it's like everything, right? Especially when we think about the careers, you can push hard for so long, but there's always a point where it catches up with you. And then you start noticing all the issues. And again, that's often when, people come to us because it's been 10, 15, 20, 25 years of, career focus, working hard to get somewhere, but that catches up because you've not been putting the time and the focus into health. It's the same thing with training. If we just start hammering everything and pushing for more and more and more, often it will produce more up until a point, and then things start to go wrong. And it's harder then to dig out of that hole to then try and get back on a kind of an even keel. Whereas if we can just keep plugging away nice and steady, we're always going to be in a better position. And often, again, the style of training we see people doing when they come to us, it is about, maximizing that reward for the time they're putting in. So they're always looking for, higher intensity options, getting more done in a short time period. And more often than not, those are the kind of things we probably want to see less of because they're currently just not in a position to handle a high stress, load from anything else because currently they've got enough going on in life. So if we chuck a load of high intensity work into the mix, they're just not going to recover. They're going to feel pretty poor. And then things like, nutrition becomes a lot harder to handle because energy levels poor, moods poor, we make bad choices, and then we kind of get stuck in that cycle. So it is often a case of, reducing a lot of the outputs and doing the things that take more time, thinking about low intensity output work is going to be super valuable. Time to think about nutrition, again, when we're not looking at the problem, we're stuck inside of it. We don't see those easy wins that we know are super important. Things like, planning food. So that nutrition is going to be in a good place rather than day to day when you've got, crazy work schedule. Trying to find a way to hit your targets from within is just not really possible a lot of the time if you're not thinking ahead. So it's very challenging for a lot of the guys, but the ability to take a step back and just think about it, it might take you a bit of time up front, but long term, it's going to save you so much time, so much wasted effort as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think, one of the important things to mention here is like people should always remember that starting a process like this comes down to really the initial assessment of their environment, their circumstances, their health, and are they in a position to actually kick off from a certain level? Because in most cases, they come to us and they not in a position to hit the training, intensity or volume, etc. So our job is always to assess where they are. Like I said, see what's working, what's not, see where they are from a mobility and flexibility standpoint, from a health perspective, blood pressure, HRV, resting heart rate, all of these things, and then make sure that we are building those health foundations first and foremost, and those foundations that we can then build upon. So it's not really coming in, and I think for a lot of guys that probably becomes quite a stressful thing before they join. They think that they'll be expected to do God knows what. And like I said, in most cases, it's like, okay, let's see where you're at. Let's see what's actually realistic here, and let's start there. But first and foremost, addressing health, stress, and recovery, which will then give us a good return on that investment. So it allows us to build upon that. Good. So that's kind of. So let's summarize that section a little bit. So when things are going well and you are making progress, what you need to do is do more of what you were doing, be patient, be consistent, be adherent, make sure you're tracking all the data, make sure you are working on your routine, and you are executing essentially the plan and the strategy. Again, doing more leads to issues, leads to problems, potentially injuries and things like that long term. Anything to add to that?
No, I just think that it's sort of the hardest thing to have is patience. But like
Patience,
anything, time is what you need to get anywhere with anything. Often more time is the one thing that's required, but it's very much the hardest thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if it's working, why change it? Stick to the plan, be consistent, and just execute, like chip away every single day. So patience is probably, the most important thing. Hey, quick break. If you've been putting your health on the back burner while building your business, leading your team, or just navigating life at full tilt, it's time to change that. Head over to martinbugaj.com and see how we can help men like you build strong, lean, energized bodies without giving up their careers, families, or sanity. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Martin Bugaj, Martin Bugaj, and drop me a message. Or find me on Instagram @MartinBugajFitness and DM me there. And if you're serious about transforming your body and your health, go straight to martinbugaj.com/transform6, and that's the starting line for men who want real change. Let's get back to it. Now, if things aren't going well, what do we always say to our clients? Let's say somebody started a journey, they're a few weeks in, and they're not really seeing much of a progress. What would you say are the most typical issues, red flags, whatever you want to call it?
I think the first step is always, a quick audit of what the actions have been over that period of time. There'll be a plan in place, and it's investigating whether, has the plan been followed? Are we ticking boxes consistently, 90% plus of the time? And then we can think about how long has that been happening for? So if we're a couple of weeks in and we've been, fully adherent, chances are we will be seeing positives. They might just not be really obvious.
That's a big one.
Yeah, body weight can often be a bit troublesome, especially early stages for some individuals. You drop into a deficit, you increase activity, and you'd expect to see body weight trend down pretty quickly. But sometimes that just isn't the case. It can be a little bit deceptive. But we know if we're nailing the boxes and consistently, completing those tasks, we're going to see positive outcomes. There's just a little bit of patience required. It's not going to happen overnight, especially again if it's been 10, 15, 20 years worth of bad decisions and not looking after things. A couple of weeks is not going to turn things around. But if we know we're being adherent, we're going to see those outcomes. And then if we're not being adherent and we're not seeing those tasks completed, it's understanding why that's not happening and figuring a way to make that a reality. Because if we can't tick the boxes in the early days, then we're going to struggle long term. So it's reassessing what's valuable from a kind of minimum expectations perspective, get that locked in, because we'd rather be doing less but doing it every week than trying to do more and failing, especially from a momentum standpoint. If we go into week 2, 3, 4 and we're psychologically feeling like we're failing, it's not really a great start. So we'd rather think about, right, let's really dial things back and just, nail the basics for a short period of time. And then that'll help build that momentum. And then we can think about maybe layering more on to kind of get a little bit more progress. But, until we're at a point where we're pretty much nailing all the objectives, we can't really be questioning, why things aren't happening yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points here and especially I think I want to stress that this is going to be mostly valuable for all our clients, but especially for clients who are starting the journey. The first or the initial few weeks of the process, you need to really understand what progress means, because like you said, scale weight is not always going to be there, and it's not always going to be tracking at the speed that you would expect it or like it to be for various different reasons. Number 2, you are fresh to the process, so you're still getting your head around that. So like you said, consistency, adherence, those things, patience are going to be absolutely vital here. From our perspective, we don't expect somebody to be 100% from the get-go every single day. That's not what this process is all about. It's really about showing up, It's really about being honest, open, and transparent, and being patient and adherent, doing whatever you can every single day. As long as you show up, we are here to help you throughout this. So managing those expectations, yes, absolutely is a big thing. But again, another big one is, even if, and that pretty much goes across the board for everyone, even if you don't see physical changes, because you won't in those initial few weeks, you won't. The changes are happening and the progress is happening. That's why we track so much data. That's why we track your blood pressure. That's why we track your sleep, your recovery, your resting heart rate, all of those things, because there's going to be so many signs of progress almost happening behind the scenes that you're not necessarily are going to be seeing in the mirror. But energy, recovery, mood, appetite, cravings, things like that are great indicators of progress happening and the client moving forward. So I think it's important for me to say this, especially to our new clients. Progress isn't always mirror and scale weight. There's just so much more to it, like I just mentioned. And I think that the focus really and appreciation should go in that direction, especially in those initial stages of the process.
Yeah, and just the fact, if you can change your habits and you go from somebody who's hardly any getting any steps in,
Yes.
low from a nutrient perspective, low fruit and veg, low fiber intake, low water intake, not really training that regularly, consuming an excess amount of calories. If you can pull intake down, increase fruit, veg, fiber, increase activity levels, like those things alone would be amazing progress, because you've gone from a position where you're going to be, driving health down every kind of week you carry on that way, to in a position where, you're going to be improving it massively just after, a couple of weeks with those kind of actions. The changes are huge.
Yeah. Absolutely. So again, to summarize this part, so if things aren't necessarily going well, so what are the things that people can do, and what are our expectations? So I'd say nailing everything, making sure that you're adherent, making sure that you're sticking to the plan, making sure that you are not obsessing about being 100% good, because it's almost impossible. Life, as I always say, will get in the way. But just show up, be honest, be transparent, make sure that you track all the data. If the progress isn't there, we'll give you that feedback, and we are here to help you make better decisions and get better every single day. Anything to add that? I suppose what I wanted to say is, if the progress isn't really happening, it's not that the program isn't working. The likelihood of you being 100 or adhering to the program as much as you should be on a daily basis isn't there. So that's what we need to look at. Are you tracking correctly? Are you sleeping? Are you improving your habits? Are you doing your steps, your targets, your cardio, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I think just being able to honestly assess that situation is the big thing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I suppose let's talk about stress, because that's actually a big and broad topic, I'd say, and especially with our demographic, executives, CEOs, businessmen, guys who are almost conditioned to stress on day-to-day basis. They don't necessarily perceive stress the same way as how we would look at stress. And stress can be an absolutely huge factor, limiting factor in making progress. So because they are used to, stressful situations, type A personalities, going after it professionally, all of that, they don't really differentiate what stress is. If I suppose for most of these guys, if they're not pulling their hair out on day-to-day basis, they have everything under control and they're not stressed. So I suppose just a bit of an overview for people out there. What would we call stress, just so they understand and have a good understanding of like how we differentiate these things?
Yeah, so stress is pretty much going to be, anything that applies stress to the system, right? And we don't often think about a lot of things being stressful. Especially as you said, like the guys we work with, come out long days, long hours in challenging jobs. But because that's the day to day and such a normal thing, they're not aware of that impact and they don't feel stressed. But the system is obviously working hard. It's dealing with a lot of things going on. Going to be, in that sympathetic state quite a lot. And they're not having those opportunities to kind of relax and wind down. We know that then if we're adding a lot of training to the mix there as well, that's a stress on the system. Often, a lot of the guys we work with, again, it's training is like a release. That's something to do to try and help with stress. But again, the way they train, often they're just piling on more stress to the system. So they're kind of in this chronic cycle of just hammering the system loads, putting under pressure, asking it to do this, do that, but never giving it a chance to recover. Not putting in the things it wants, not hydrated, not enough nutrients. We know that stress depletes nutrients, stress impacts digestion. So then we're going to struggle to get the good things we need out of food, even if we're getting enough of the good stuff in. So we're in a position where we're kind of hammering the nutrients in terms of depleting them on a regular basis, but then not getting enough in. So we're not kind of fueling effectively. And then we're just in a bit of a position where there's just no energy, just running off stress essentially, right? In a position where there isn't really an appetite. So there'll be, how many guys do we work with who just won't eat for long periods of time because there's no appetite, which again isn't, normal. We wouldn't want that. They get to the end of the day and then because they're not eating all day, the cravings appear. They're wanting the things that are obviously high in glucose. The body's just after readily available energy because it hasn't had anything all day. Easy to put away thousands of calories of crappy food basically, which doesn't help with energy production, doesn't help with health, doesn't help with mood. And then the next day just starts again. And at no point is there kind of that period of time where good quality nutrition is going in, good quality rest. Sleep isn't really there because they're just obviously running almost on like a high all of the time. So it's just eventually catches up. And that's when those kind of, challenges really start to appear. And then people start seeking help because things just don't feel like they did 10, 15, 20 years ago. And a lot of it is down to that period of time spent just being in a really stressed out state with an opportunity to relax.
Yeah, absolutely. I think good point here. What really springs to mind is the difference between energy and adrenaline. I think a lot of these guys, when you ask them a question, what's your energy like, energy levels, etc. Well, yeah, I'm good. I'm not, stressed. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm overly stressed. I have good levels of energy, but I think they mistaken the energy for the adrenaline. A lot of the time, they are fueled by caffeine and stimulants throughout the day to really get them going. They obviously are in high-pressured scenarios and situations where they have to kind of get into the next gear to make decisions, take risks, etc. So I think that's all adrenaline. And for them, I suppose, they don't really understand the difference between having good energy and then, being in those alert states where they're just essentially firing on adrenaline all the time. And like you said, then what they do is to release that stress, they go to the gym, junk volume, a lot of cardio, high intensity training, low on nutrients, high on stimulants, no recovery, no sleep, or sleep is essentially bad quality, therefore it drives the recovery down. That leads to inflammation and injuries in long term. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle. And again, I'm going to stress this in here. It's so important for us as coaches to really set those expectations from the get-go and make sure that these people understand that in order to change their physique and their body composition, we have to start with looking at overall health and work on from like a hierarchy perspective of what's the most important thing we need to address in order to get the best return on investment in that particular area. So if they're not sleeping, if they're highly stressed, that's the thing that we need to address in here first. We always say blood pressure, resting heart rate, cardiovascular health, all those things, because that's essentially laying the foundations for good health, better outcomes from performance perspective.
Yeah, and if we don't start seeing improvements, in base health markers, especially with the age a lot of the guys we work with are, they're not many years off being in real dangerous territory in terms of, cardiovascular disease, health conditions, those things become harder and harder to manage as you get older, harder to reverse. And, the impact of things like elevated blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, can be really damaging in that kind of corridor. A lot of the men we work with are. And, you don't often feel the effects of that until it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people kind of neglect that side of things and focus on, oh yeah, I just want to lose some weight. So, I look in the mirror and I feel better and my self-confidence goes up. Yeah, that's absolutely part of it. But I think health is the most important element of what we do, first and foremost, I would say, because that's where we need to start. Good stuff. Anything else to add to that? There was a good point you mentioned about cravings, calories, etc. That links to the point about progress. I think people have this idea that when you ask them a question, it's like, okay, what's your nutrition like? Usually they'll say, yes, it's good, it's fine. I look kind of, I watch what I eat and I don't eat that much. And that answer usually comes from the fact that they don't eat much during the day. But like you said, the last meal of the day when they're stressed, they kind of like get home, are in this safe and comfortable environment of their own home. They sit down, they watch television, and then they start consuming a ton of calories. Portion sizes, highly palatable foods, highly caloric foods, and that all adds up. I think people need to realize that you can actually consume in one sitting a lot more calories that you actually realize. It's not uncommon for some people to consume 2,500, 3,000 calories in one sitting, right?
Yeah, I think especially now with the prevalence of ultra processed foods, they're not satiating. They don't require a huge effort on a digestion standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So we can consume a lot of calories and not feel satiated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Benefits of it. There's not a lot of nutrients in there, so it can be a situation where it might not be a lot of food, but because it's so calorie dense, like you said, easy to put away thousands and thousands of calories and not realize that. And that's the big distinction when we think about a lot of the nutrition choices. Just because there's not a lot of food doesn't mean there's not a lot of calories, and just because there's not a lot of calories doesn't mean it's not a lot of food when we kind of make those changes. And we're not seeking to eat as little as possible. We want to proactively put in good quality food, and then we stave off those issues with cravings later on in the day. We feel full. Often the easiest thing to do to not have problems with huge cravings later on and struggling to kind of rein in that intake is just regularly consume food throughout the day as you would. Have a breakfast, have a lunch, decent quality options, and you'll quickly find that on an evening you don't get those issues anymore because you're a lot more regulated. and you can actually digest things effectively, feel the benefit of that, have the energy, and then it's not long before you start seeing huge improvements off the back of that.
Absolutely. I think spacing meals out, making sure that some form of kind of planning ahead goes into it. So making sure that you think about the next day or the following day. Okay, what am I going to have? How am I going to spread my meals throughout the day? Or is it calories? It doesn't have to be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It could be meal 1, meal 2, meal 3, however many you're able to space out throughout the day, and kind of thinking about the choices that people are making, improving the quality of their choices, having more fruits, more vegetables, more fiber, more nutrients, things like that. Also hydration. Yeah. Good. Just on the topic of stress, I think it would be maybe worth mentioning that your body really doesn't differentiate stress as such. When you ask people, are you stressed? All they think about is like, well, have I had a argument with someone? Or, did I have, I don't know, did I lash out on somebody or whatever? Like, it's worth understanding that financial stress, emotional stress, digestive stress, physical stress, all of those are stresses on the body. So when we talk about stress, people need to realize that it's not just a particular situation that was stressful during the day. It could be, again, doing too much in the gym and under recovering. It could be eating crap food and really stressing the digestive system, which then has effects on potentially sleep, recovery, all of those things. So yeah, just for people out there, stress isn't just, having an argument with someone. It could be a lot of different things. Hey, quick break. If you've been putting your health on the back burner while building your business, leading your team, or just navigating life at full tilt, it's time to change that. Head over to martinbugaj.com and see how we can help men like you build strong, lean, energized bodies without giving up their careers, families, or sanity. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Martin Bugaj, MartinBugaj, and drop me a message. Or find me on Instagram @MartinBugajFitness and DM me there. And if you're serious about transforming your body and your health, go straight to martinbugaj.com/transform6, and that's the starting line for men who want real change. Let's get back to it. What else would you say are the kind of most common, I wouldn't say necessarily complaints, but things that we see with our clients when it comes to making progress?
I think often the challenging thing can be, we're taking somebody who's 20 plus years of habits that have led them to the position they're in, poor choices, behaviors that don't match with where they want to be. And then we're trying to think about how can we move that towards what we need to see, and that can be challenging initially. It can feel like a big change, and it is. And, sometimes people drop into that really quickly and they find that, just having that structure and that guidance is all they needed, and ticking those boxes is pretty straightforward. Sometimes it can be a challenge making those, transitions from highly calorific, low nutrient, low protein, low fiber, food choices towards consistently making better choices. Can be quite challenging, and not something they, kind of find they can nail straight away. And that's, perfectly normal. If you've been eating a certain way for kind of 15, 20 years, to suddenly change that, it isn't necessarily going to be straightforward. But the ability to just, keep plugging away, and always remembering that everything you do positively contributes. It isn't black and white. If you make a couple of bad choices one day, it doesn't mean that day is written off or there's no benefit from it. So trying to avoid those kind of fully on or fully off mindsets and just thinking about every single positive thing you can do contributes. It might not seem like it across a week or two, but if you think about the last 20 years, a lot of people probably haven't been doing anything massively wrong or, away from the norm, but that accumulation of time. And you've seen those negatives accumulate until you get to a point where you can see that manifesting itself. It's the same going the other way. It's going to take time. Initially, you don't notice a lot of things, but if you keep doing it, keep plugging away, before you know it, those positive choices, have a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, the Tesco slogan, every little helps. Every good positive choice that you can make every single day is going to slowly accumulate over time, and you are going to be in a much better position than when you started. So again, I suppose the overarching theme is patience, adherence, showing up, not giving up. These are the sort of things that make those journeys really successful. When you look at clients that have been extremely successful, these are the ones that basically focus on day-to-day tasks, and they just don't look massively ahead of themselves. They just focus on what's ahead each day, and that's what they kind of it's ticking boxes. That's what it comes down to, ticking boxes. The reason that they come to us is because they lack structure, they lack clarity, they have information overload, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, they are very inefficient, and in most cases they do way too much. Our job is to remove all that noise, instill and implement a good, solid plan, roadmap, structure, show them what to do, how to do it, given their circumstances on day-to-day basis, because we work with clients individually and everyone is different. And all they need to do is just focus on ticking those boxes. And it sounds, pretty simple in theory. But when it actually comes down to it, yeah, there's going to be frustrating situations. And people will be surprised. Sometimes it's hard to do the basics, the very, very easy and simple things, isn't it?
Yeah, most of the boxes that the majority of individuals need to tick to achieve what they want to achieve are pretty simple. It isn't overly complex, but the challenge is then dealing with humans. How can you tick those boxes consistently over a period of time when you've got barriers being thrown at you left, right, and centre? You deal with, again, a stressed out system, family, work. That's when the challenge arises, and getting bogged down with the minutiae. Thinking about, oh well, what about X, Y, Z? And the biggest challenge is just avoiding worrying about those things, because while you're worrying about, I'm having too much sodium, you're not sticking to calorie targets. You're not getting enough protein or fiber in. Am I doing the right kind of cardio when you're not actually getting it in? Those simple things, steps, just day-to-day activity. How many people don't even hit 50,000 steps a week, anywhere near that, and then want to think about advanced training techniques?
Such a good point.
You're not going to achieve. You could train 4 times a week as hard as you like. You're not going to outdo the level of activity you would get from just nailing a good amount of steps every day, getting outside, fresh air, daylight. The basics work, but they're just not that interesting.
Sexy. Yeah, they're not sexy. They're not interesting. They're not, it's such a good point. So let's just stay here for a second, because you're absolutely right. It's always the boring stuff. It's always the basics that really yields the best and the biggest returns. Yet, like we said, it's not sexy. It's not cool. It's not fancy. So it's just boring, and it's hard to, I suppose it's simple, but it's not easy. It is hard to make yourself stick to something day in, day out for an extended period of time, even knowing that it will yield results. But it's just our brains are so kind of wrapped up. It's like you've seen the next hit workout on Instagram, or the influencer here or there is showing like, this is the best exercise, this is the best thing for this. It's all bollocks. It's all noise. It's all distraction. Focus on the things that will get you the most return on your investment from a time perspective, and, finances as well. Because once you've decided that you want to invest and commit to the program, you should just really trust the process. That's all we ask. We have a massively proven record of thousands at this point of transformations, success stories. Yet, I suppose it is a challenge, isn't it? It's always going to be. It's managing people's expectations and their emotions. And I kind of get it, to a point. It's something new. So, like you said, they've been programmed for so many years to do X, Y, and Z. They come here, it's like, oh, is it really? That's all I can do? It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, and circumstances play a huge role. A lot of the situations people are comparing themselves to that they're seeing online and hearing about, to individuals who've got significant training experience, who've got, a lot of time spent tracking nutrition. They've done everything, previously. It's just pulling it all together. And, you can make tremendous progress in, 12 weeks, 24 weeks. If you've been there, done that before to a high level, and you just drop back into a rhythm with things. Whereas if, it's been 20 years of poor choices, you've never had, real training experience, you've never been someone who's looked after the nutrition, a lot of that journey, the early stages especially, but, a lot of the time that whole journey is learning and understanding what you need to be doing and when and how to do it. You can't just drop into straight away nailing everything because you've not got that experience. You can't get the benefits from a lot of the training that you would get if you'd been significantly more experienced in the gym. You're learning how to train, and that takes a long time. Even if you've been training for 20 years, what have you been doing? Chances are it isn't the kind of work that is going to be the most productive, and it's going to take a good chunk of time learning how to do that and becoming aware of that.
Precisely. Great point. I think, yeah, you nailed it. A lot of people have such big expectations of themselves purely based on the fact that they've been going to the gym for X amount of years. But when it comes down to, okay, what was the quality of the work over that period of time is a completely different question. So yeah, absolutely. The results and the expectations vary massively from individual to individual, and it's based on, like you said, individual circumstances. How much training, age, experience, all of that do you have? And I think it brings me back to my original point. When it comes to progress, I think people need to be a lot more appreciative of the progress that they are making from a health perspective.
Yeah.
Because noticing the energy improvement, noticing how well they recover, how they are dealing with stress and emotions on day-to-day basis, how they've changed their habits when it comes to nutrition and looking after themselves, their health. Like, all of those things have to be taken into account when you look at progress. It's not just, oh, I'm not looking any different, or my weight is not moving, therefore I'm not making any progress. That always drives me crazy, because there's just so much that people don't see, and that's really the true transformation that is happening on health level.
And time as well. How much time you're willing to commit to things, because you can achieve a lot more results if you've got a lot more time.
Yeah.
And you might not have that time, which is fine, but you can't expect to achieve the results somebody's achieved when they've committed 2 times, 3 times more than you have, because that's just the reality. If you can train for longer and within reason, you're going to get more results if it's structured appropriately. If you spend more time on output, you're going to achieve more fat loss. Spend more time planning your food, sourcing your food, cooking your food. Whereas if you've got not a lot of time to give, there's only so many ways you can obviously get that output in and burn the calories you need to burn in order to see fat loss happen. We can't drive calories too low, because then problems, arise from that. So if you don't have the time to put in on a weekly basis, it's just going to take you, twice as long, 3 times as long as somebody else who has got that time to put in. And it's just, that's the harsh reality. Especially nowadays with, a lot of jobs being sedentary. If you're spending 8+ hours not moving, you're going to have a much harder time than somebody who doesn't have to spend 8 hours sat in a chair. They're already ahead from a movement perspective. So it's it is finding the time. And if you can't find the time, there's no other magical way of making it happen.
Yeah. No, absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. Okay, let's just talk about the fact that a lot of people, when they don't necessarily see the progress that they expect from themselves, they immediately jump into conclusions and blame their hormones. They kind of blame their genetics, all of that. What would you say to that?
I think the biggest thing is, honestly assess the situation. There are very few situations where minutiae is the issue.
Mm.
People have, legitimate metabolic issues, other health issues that would impact things like fat loss. And it's very rare that's the case. What we're very good at, all of us, are justifying things, seeing things through rose-tinted glasses, not being mindful of what our actual intake is. It's the big tracking and convincing yourself you're eating 2,000 calories a day when you could very easily be up at closer to 3,000. And that's something that, when we're making those choices, when we're logging things, rounding down rather than rounding up, not worrying about that sauce or how was the food cooked. Same thing with output. If we're not getting, activity on a regular basis, that's the most likely the issue. And if you're not nailing nutrition, if you're not nailing output, if you're not being consistent with, getting that sleep and recovery, then it's pointless worrying about other things, because they're going to improve pretty much everything with a trickle down effect. And that's the key thing. If you can nail those basics, you don't have to worry about those tiny things. And you might nail everything for 6 months, genuinely, legitimately, and struggle. And that would be a situation where maybe there is something going on. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Get some things investigated. Reach out to your doctor, get some labs, and you might find there's things going on. But more often than not, it is just a lack of adherence. I mean, personally, I've never come across a situation where there was something outside of adhering to the basics that was the issue.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think people love to jump into conclusions. I think they love to focus, like you said, on the minutia and on the fancy sort of stuff, hormones, genetics, all of that stuff. Where in most cases, that's not the issue. The issue is, are you tracking correctly? Because to your point, it's very easily done. You miss, I spoke to somebody the other day, and they are tracking 1 tablespoon of olive oil when they add it to the salad. And trust me, when you have a big bowl of salad, 1 tablespoon of olive oil is literally nothing. What most people do is just drizzle it from the bottle and they sort of guesstimate. And that could be a difference of like hundreds of calories in that one simple example. Yeah, I've had a big bowl of salad. I've eaten healthily. Okay, but what about the oil? Have you tracked that? Because that fat is going to really massively skew the intake of your calories. So examples like that, and we could probably go on and on and on. Like, I don't know, you're probably aware of this show. I can't remember what the title. Like, it used to be on telly, Unconscious Eaters or something like that, where they put cameras in people's houses and they were tracking them 24/7. The amount of unconscious decisions and choices people make without even being aware of what they are doing equated to like thousands of calories consumed outside of their main meals. It would be a biscuit here, a spoon of sugar here, couple of nuts here and there, healthy, so to speak, snacks. That all adds up. And devil always sits in the detail. It's those little things that are the most caloric, calorie-dense choices that people sort of reach out to. It's not the sugar that most people blame. It's the sugar and fat combination. That's going to get you the most hidden calories, The handful of nuts, healthy snack. Yeah, but how many calories are in those nuts. So yeah, it's just being mindful of that and really understanding that is a huge step in the right direction, especially with a lot of our clients. Once they start tracking their intake and their food and tracking genuinely everything to the best of their ability, because it's not always necessarily that simple and possible, it's such a big eye opener. You know, we hear it constantly. Oh, I didn't actually know that I'm over consuming X or under consuming or whatever it may be. So yeah, I'd say that's a huge one.
Yeah, and just I say, being mindful of everything, overestimating if you're not sure, practicing, like everything. Tracking is a skill, and you don't need to track forever, but it's much easier to manage things, if they're being measured. So a period of time where you're putting a lot of effort into understanding how to track things, building up that ability to estimate things pretty well, getting used to it, but always being mindful that chances are, if I'm not sure what's in it, there's probably more in it. Especially when we're eating out, and just it's always easy to pick the option that's lower calories because it makes us feel better. But in reality, if we're just missing out on what's actually going on, just selling ourselves short, and then it's another 2, 3, 4 weeks have gone by before it becomes really obvious that intake is obviously higher than it needs to be, because we would have been seeing X, Y, Z happen by now. There isn't
Absolutely.
You would be, excluded from kind of normal function.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Okay. So in closing, what would we say? We said being patient, being mindful, sticking to the plan, trusting the process, nailing the basics, showing up every single day, being honest and transparent with yourself and with your coaching team. I think that's a big one. I always say this, and I will repeat it again because it's important. We are not here to judge anyone. We are here to help. Therefore, like from a coaching perspective, we don't necessarily care whether somebody fucks up on, couple of days a week or not. As long as they are honest and open with us, they say what's going on, then we actually have the tools to help them make better decisions, straighten things out, moving forward. But if somebody feels, hopefully that's not the case for anybody, because we try to create an environment where people feel like they can trust us and don't feel judged. But if they are open and honest and really genuinely ask questions, like that gives us the tools to help them. Yes, there will be situations where you fuck up. That's okay. Get on your horse and off we go. One bad decision doesn't screw your progress. Equally, one good decision doesn't make your transformation. So I think that's something to really remember.
Yeah, and we're all accountable for our own actions. We can't expect a positive outcome or the outcome we want without doing the things that are required to achieve that. We're not owed anything. It is very much what we do will result in where we are. So how can we expect to be somewhere different if we're just doing the same things over and over again?
Yeah, great point. And I'm just going to jump on that because that's actually extremely important. I think a lot of people feel like, okay, I've signed up to the program, I've committed financially, and I've made the first step. Therefore, it's all good. And I used to see it all the time when I was in-person personal training. People would justify their stupid choices during the week by just coming and seeing me 2-3 times a week and feeling like, oh yeah, I've been to the gym, I've seen Martin, that's fine. I kind of don't need to pay attention to anything else. It's the work that you do outside of training is what counts. So again, taking that responsibility as an adult for yourself and accountability for your choices is the number one thing that people have to do. We are only here to help you to the best of our ability. But coaching relationship is a mutual kind of it takes two to tango. You can't be just dragging somebody out and trying to motivate them and kicking their ass and like, come on, you can do it, whatever. Like, that's not what we do. You are here because you want to change and you need help and structure, and that's what we provide. We provide feedback. That's what we do, and that's what really gets people results. But first and foremost, you have to be accountable for your own actions. Good stuff. I think we kind of covered everything. Is there anything else that you want to add to this?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just those key messages, just keep pushing, keep being patient. And it's often that period of time where, you give up, you would just lead it into, the big results and the positive starting to become a lot more apparent.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for your time, Chris. We will do more of those. I think it's very helpful and I know it's very helpful for a lot of our clients, current clients, and the ones that are sort of joining the program. I spoke to somebody yesterday who said that they've listened to all the episodes twice, and it's been extremely helpful on this journey so far. So, as long as it helps one person, we've done our job. Listen, man, great to see you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.
Pleasure as always.
If you enjoyed this episode and felt inspired and would like to find out more about my body transformation program, please visit my website at www.martinbugaj.com or message me on Instagram at martinbugajfitness, and we can schedule a free strategy call where we can discuss your goals and find out more about how I can help you transform your body and your health.